A ghostly face stares out from ancient linen. Is this the true burial cloth of Jesus, or the most perfect forgery ever made? By the end of this investigation, you will understand the astonishing scientific evidence that makes this relic an unsolvable puzzle. We will examine a medieval carbon dating result that shocked the world and explore a mysterious image that holds three-dimensional information no artist could create. What does genuine faith look like to you? This sacred cloth did not emerge from the ancient world, but from a small French town in the 1350s. Its first owner was a knight, Geoffroy de Charny, a man of reputation who presented the shroud to the public in Liary. The reaction was immediate and profound. Pilgrims traveled to see the haunting image for themselves, sparking a wave of devotion. Yet the mystery was born not from universal acceptance, but from instant and official doubt. The local bishop, Henry of Poitiers, launched an investigation. He interviewed the artist who he claimed had painted it. His conclusion was stark. He declared the shroud a clever forgery, a work of human skill designed to trick the faithful. So from its very first appearance, the shroud presented two irreconcilable truths. To the weeping pilgrim, it was a divine gift. To the skeptical bishop, it was a painter's cunning deception. This conflict, set in motion over 6 centuries ago, has never been resolved. But what exactly were these pilgrims and that bishop looking at? The image on the Turin Shroud is unlike any other religious artifact. It is not a painting in any conventional sense. There is no brushstroke, no pigment, and no binder like egg tempera or oil that has seeped into the cloth. Instead, the picture of this man is a superficial, straw-yellow discoloration. It exists only on the very topmost threads of the linen, as if the fibers themselves were subtly scorched or chemically changed, but only on their surface. This is not how any medieval artist worked. If you were to scrape away the top layer of fibrils, the image would disappear because the color does not penetrate deeper into the cloth. Now consider how you see this image today. In a normal photograph, dark areas represent shadows and light areas represent highlights. The shroud reverses this completely. What looks to your eye like a faint, sepia-toned man is in reality a perfect photographic negative. The dark areas on the cloth correspond to light areas on a positive image, and the light areas on the cloth correspond to shadows. This fact was not discovered until the invention of photography in the 19th century. When a lawyer and amateur photographer named Secondo Pia first photographed the shroud in 1898, he was stunned. Looking at his developed glass plate negative, he saw for the first time in history a clear, detailed, and positively lifelike portrait. The faint stains on the linen had transformed into a breathtakingly sharp image of a serene, bearded man with all the wounds of crucifixion. This negative property was a technological impossibility in the 1300s. How could a forger create an image they could never see or comprehend? The man imprinted on the cloth is hauntingly detailed. He bears the marks of a brutal Roman crucifixion. There is a wound on his wrist, not his palm, which aligns with modern understanding that nails driven through the palms would not support a body's weight. His feet are pierced, and his side shows a large, elliptical wound, consistent with a Roman lance. His back and legs are covered with what appear to be scores of scourge marks from a flagrum, a Roman whip. Perhaps most striking of all is the evidence from his head. Dozens of small, puncture-like wounds circle the scalp as if from a cap of thorns. Every single wound matches the biblical accounts of the Passion of Jesus. So we are left with a profound contradiction. The bishop declared it a painter's trick, yet the image itself possesses properties that no painter of that era could have possibly achieved. It is a negative photograph created centuries before photography was invented. That faint, sepia-toned image on the linen held its secret for centuries, a riddle waiting for the right technology to be asked. The key moment arrived in a darkened room in 1898. An Italian lawyer and amateur photographer named Secondo Pia had been granted a rare privilege to photograph the sacred shroud. He set up his camera in the Turin Cathedral, the cumbersome equipment and slow photographic plates of the era making it a painstaking process. After the long exposure, he retreated to his darkroom to develop the glass plate negatives. He expected to see a faint, ghostly imprint, a simple copy of the cloth he had just photographed. What he saw instead made him nearly drop the plate. The negative in his hands did not show a faint, stained cloth. It revealed with shocking clarity and depth the positive image of a man. The faint stains on the shroud had acted as a perfect photographic negative. Where the cloth was dark, the negative was light, and where the cloth was light, the negative was dark. This inversion brought forth a face of serene and haunting detail, a three-dimensional portrait with defined features, a beard, and the clear wounds of crucifixion. It was a face no one had ever truly seen before. In that instant, the shroud transformed. It was no longer just a medieval curiosity for pilgrims. It became a modern scientific enigma. How could a relic from the 1300s contain a perfect photographic negative, a concept that did not exist for another 4 centuries? Secondo Pia's accidental discovery did more than startle one man. It catapulted the Turin Shroud into the global public consciousness, launching a new and furious debate that would rage through the 20th century and beyond. Secondo Pia's discovery demanded a new kind of investigation, one that moved beyond the cathedral and into the laboratory. Decades of speculation finally culminated in a landmark event. In 1978, a team of top American scientists calling themselves the Shroud of Turin Research Project was granted an extraordinary opportunity. For 5 days and nights, they were given unprecedented, round-the-clock access to the relic. Their mission was simple yet monumental: to subject the shroud to the full battery of 20th century forensic science to finally answer the question, what is this thing? They arrived not as believers or skeptics, but as rigorous investigators, armed with truckloads of equipment worth millions of dollars. They used advanced microscopy to peer at the very fibers of the linen. They employed spectroscopy, a technique that analyzes how light interacts with matter, to identify the chemical fingerprints of the image. They took thousands of photographs under every conceivable light, from ultraviolet to infrared. They left no thread untested. Their conclusions, published after years of analysis, were startling. They found absolutely no evidence of brushstrokes, no particles of pigment, and no binding medium like oil or tempera that any artist would need. The image was not painted on, it was not a stain, it was not a dye. The coloration was a mere surface phenomenon, a chemical change in the topmost fibrils of the linen that resembled a very subtle scorch. They could not replicate how it was made. Then they turned to the dark, reddish-brown areas that appeared to be blood. Their tests confirmed it. These were not paint or vermilion, a common medieval pigment. The stains contained the clear chemical signature of human blood, specifically the protein hemoglobin and its breakdown product, bilirubin. The blood, they determined, had soaked into the cloth first, and the mysterious body image was superimposed over it and around it. So the scientific team reached a profound and frustrating impasse. They had definitively ruled out an artistic forgery, yet they could not explain what natural or supernatural process had created a perfect, superficial, photographic negative of a crucified man on a piece of 1st century linen. They ended their report with a now famous sentence stating that the image remains an enigma. The science had cleared away the smoke of simple explanations, only to reveal a deeper, more compelling fire. Science had called the shroud an enigma, but it had not called it a fake. That verdict was about to be delivered by a different kind of test, one that promised to cut through all the mystery with the cold, hard certainty of a number. In 1988, in a move that seemed to promise a final answer, the Vatican authorized a radical procedure. A single, postage stamp-sized sample was cut from a corner of the shroud. This precious fragment was then carefully divided and sent under strict protocol to 3 of the world's most prestigious radiocarbon dating laboratories at the University of Oxford, the University of Zurich, and the University of Arizona. Radiocarbon dating works by measuring the steady decay of a radioactive isotope, carbon-14, found in all organic materials like flax linen. By calculating how much carbon-14 remains, scientists can determine with remarkable precision when a plant was harvested or an animal died. The world held its breath. Here was a test that could not be swayed by faith or subjective interpretation. It would simply give a date. The results from all 3 labs were cross-checked, compiled, and announced with a 95% confidence level. The linen of the Turin Shroud, they declared, dated from between 1260 and 1390 AD. The news was a bombshell. It landed with the force of a final, unanswerable judgment. The shroud was medieval. It was created precisely in that period when it first appeared in historical records in the 1350s. For countless observers, the case was closed. The haunting image was not the burial cloth of a first-century Messiah. It was a brilliant, inexplicable, but ultimately medieval forgery, a creation of the very era that produced Geoffroy de Charny and the skeptical Bishop of Poitiers. The scientific quest that began with Secondo Pia's photographic surprise appeared to have reached its bitter end. The mystery, it seemed, had been solved. Yet the story of the carbon dating was not over. Almost as soon as the results were announced, a chorus of dissenting voices emerged from within the scientific community itself. These researchers did not dispute the science of radiocarbon dating, but they began to ask a more probing question. Was the tiny sample cut from the shroud truly representative of the entire cloth? The first and most persistent challenge concerns an invisible world living on the linen. The shroud has been handled by countless hands over centuries, exposed to smoke from fires and stored in less than sterile conditions. Critics of the dating argue that this history created a perfect environment for microbes. Bacteria and fungi can colonize ancient cloth, weaving a thin, modern blanket of their own cells across the surface. This microbial mat, sometimes called a bioplastic coating, is made of newer carbon. When the sample was cleaned for testing, could the labs have fully removed this modern contamination? If even a tiny, undetectable fraction remained, it would have skewed the date dramatically younger, like a single drop of ink turning a glass of clear water blue. Another theory points to a different kind of contamination. The shroud survived a severe fire in the 1600s, which melted part of its silver casket and left the cloth scorched and doused with water. This event, some scientists propose, could have introduced carbon monoxide into the linen fibers. Carbon monoxide molecules can bond permanently to the cloth, and this gas in the atmosphere contains carbon that is also relatively young. If the sample was contaminated in this way, the radiocarbon clock would have been reset, giving a falsely medieval date. Perhaps the most tangible challenge involves the sample location itself. The piece cut for dating came from a single corner, an area that is visibly different from the main body of the cloth. This corner shows evidence of being expertly rewoven, a common medieval practice for repairing damaged relics. What if the scientists, in their quest for a pure sample, accidentally dated not the original shroud, but a nearly invisible patch job from the 1300s? They would have gotten a perfect medieval date, but only for the repair thread, not for the ancient cloth it was meant to mend. So the definitive answer from 1988 began to look less like a full stop and more like a question mark. The debate had not been settled by science. It had simply moved into a far more complex and technical arena, where invisible contaminants and ancient repair threads kept the ultimate mystery alive. While the carbon dating pointed to the Middle Ages, the very fabric of the shroud itself tells a different, much older story. The linen is woven in a specific pattern known as a 3-to-1 herringbone twill. This is not a simple, common cloth. It is a complex, high-quality textile, and it matches perfectly with textiles found in archaeological sites dating back to the 1st century, specifically from the region of ancient Judea. This kind of weave was rare in medieval Europe, where the shroud supposedly originated, but it was precisely the kind of fine, expensive cloth that a wealthy man like Joseph of Arimathea, the biblical figure who provided the tomb, would have used for a burial. So the material itself seems to whisper of a different time and place, a world far from 14th century France. This whisper was amplified by a Swiss criminal botanist named Max Frey. In the 1970s, he was granted permission to press sticky tape onto the surface of the shroud to collect microscopic particles. What he found, he claimed, was a botanical time capsule. He identified dozens of different pollen grains trapped in the fibers. Pollen is incredibly durable, a unique fingerprint for every species of plant. Frey asserted that many of these pollen types came from plant species that grow only in the area around Jerusalem. Even more compellingly, he found pollen from plants that are native to the arid, sparsely vegetated region of Edessa in modern Turkey, and even from the Constantinople area. This pollen trail, he argued, traced a plausible historical journey for the shroud from Jerusalem to Edessa to Constantinople, and finally into the hands of crusaders who brought it to Europe. If his analysis was correct, the cloth had traveled across the ancient world long before it ever appeared in Lyri. Of course, Frey's findings are hotly contested. His methods have been questioned, and the very idea of using pollen to date an object is fraught with challenges, especially since pollen can be contaminated by later handling. But the combination of the ancient weave and the contested pollen creates a powerful counter-narrative to the carbon dating. It suggests that the shroud is a physical artifact, a piece of cloth that carries within its threads not just an image, but a map of its own possible, incredible journey. The blood on the shroud presents its own separate and startling mystery. Let your eyes trace the dark, reddish-brown stains that mark the wrists, the feet, and the wound in the side. To a forensic scientist, these are not just symbolic marks. They behave exactly like real blood from a wounded human body. When a person bleeds, the blood is a complex mixture. The red cells and the liquid plasma, called serum, can separate after a wound clots, and this is precisely what we see on the linen. Around the main bloodstains, especially at the scourge marks on the back, researchers have observed faint, clear halos. These are not red. They are a lighter, yellowish stain that forms a ring around the darker clot. This is a forensic signature of serum, the liquid part of blood that has separated and seeped out from the clotted wound. To forge that, a medieval artist would need to understand advanced hematology, applying first the thick blood and then, in perfect registration, the watery serum halo, a detail invisible to the naked eye without modern magnification. How could a forger fake a biological process he could not possibly see or comprehend? The chemical analysis deepens the puzzle. Scientists confirmed the presence of hemoglobin, the oxygen-carrying protein in blood. But they also found elevated levels of two other key substances. The first is bilirubin, a yellowish pigment that appears in the blood when a person suffers from massive physical trauma or severe bruising. The second is creatinine, a chemical waste product that builds up in the bloodstream when muscle tissue is broken down, something that happens under extreme torture or a brutal flogging. The combination of bilirubin and creatinine paints a specific clinical picture. It points not to the blood of a healthy person, but to an individual who was tortured mercilessly before death. This is a pathological blood profile, a chemical story of immense suffering encoded right into the fibers of the cloth. So we are faced with another impossible choice. Did a brilliant medieval forger, centuries before the discovery of blood components and forensic pathology, somehow concoct a complex pigment that perfectly mimics the chemical signature of a torture victim's blood, complete with microscopic serum rings? Or are we looking at the genuine, physical residue of a profound and terrible event? The blood itself refuses to give a simple answer, forcing us to look even closer at the man these stains belong to. But the most profound mystery of the shroud is not what you can see, but what you cannot. Every other image in human history, from a child's drawing to a Renaissance masterpiece, is two-dimensional. It interprets light and shadow, but it has no inherent depth. The shroud is fundamentally different. In the 1970s, a new kind of analysis unlocked this secret. Scientists used a device called a VP8 image analyzer, an instrument developed for NASA to map the surface of the moon. The principle was simple. In a normal photograph, a dark spot might be a shadow or it might be a dark pigment. There is no way to tell the difference, but when they fed the shroud's image into the analyzer, something miraculous happened. The machine interpreted the varying intensities of the straw yellow discoloration not as random shades of pigment, but as precise distance data. The darker an area was on the shroud, the closer the cloth had been to the body at that point. The lighter the area, the farther away the cloth was. This meant the image itself was a perfect topographical map of a human form. Using this data, the VP8 produced a three-dimensional rendering of the man in the shroud. The result was not a flat picture, it was a statue. His face, his hands, his torso all emerged in perfect, measurable relief. His nose projected forward, his eye sockets receded, the planes of his cheeks were clearly defined. No artist, no matter how skilled, can paint in 3 dimensions. A painter can create the illusion of depth, but that illusion is designed for a human eye from a single viewpoint. It contains no actual, measurable distance data. If you were to take a photograph of a painted portrait and run it through the VP8 analyzer, the result would be a distorted, lumpy mess. The machine would try to interpret the artist's shading as real depth, and it would fail. The shroud is the only known image in the world that possesses this property. The information for a perfect 3-dimensional reconstruction is encoded directly into the faint, superficial stains on the linen. So we are faced with an impossible feat of medieval engineering. How does a forger, 600 years before computers and space exploration, create an image that only makes sense to a 20th century machine built for mapping celestial bodies? The shroud did not just capture a man's likeness, it captured his very shape in a way that defies every known method of human artistry. If a medieval artist created this, how did they do it without leaving a single trace of their method? We are left with a gallery of ingenious theories, each one an attempt to solve this ancient puzzle with human hands. One of the most persistent ideas involves a very old optical device, the camera obscura. This is simply a dark room or box with a small hole in one wall, projecting an inverted image of the outside world onto the opposite surface. It is a principle known since antiquity. Could a forger have used one to project the image of a model or a bas-relief statue onto the linen, which was then chemically treated to capture that projected light? Perhaps they used a lens to sharpen the image and coated the cloth in a light-sensitive silver compound like silver nitrate, which darkens when exposed to light. This would be a form of primitive photography centuries ahead of its time, but the problems with this theory are immense. The image on the shroud is a negative, but a camera obscura projects a positive image. To create a negative, the forger would have to understand this inversion, and then somehow create a negative of a positive projection, a conceptual leap that seems impossible without knowing what a photograph even is. Furthermore, the image has perfect 3-dimensional information encoded within it. A camera obscura projection is flat, subject to the same distortions of light and shadow as any other 2-dimensional image. It cannot impart true topographical data. Then there is the acid painting theory. This suggests an artist created a faint, superficial image by using a dilute acid or some other chemical on a cloth draped over a bas-relief, perhaps a heated statue. The chemical would slowly degrade the cellulose in the linen fibers, creating the straw yellow color. This could explain the superficial nature of the image and the lack of pigments. But could it achieve the incredible microscopic precision of the shroud's details? The individual fibrils are colored, but the threads right next to them are completely untouched. This requires a control so fine it borders on the impossible. How does one apply a liquid or vapor with such pinpoint accuracy that it only affects the very tops of certain threads, creating the subtle gradients of a face without any pooling, bleeding, or visible brushstrokes? Another idea involves a simple rubbing technique, like placing the cloth over a stone sculpture and dabbing it with a pigment-soaked cloth. This is how medieval artisans often created contact relics. But this method would produce a distorted, flattened image. It could never capture the subtle, wraparound quality of the shroud, the way the image accurately maps the distances from the body to the cloth across a three-dimensional form. The bloodstains present their own insurmountable hurdle. In this scenario, the artist would have had to apply real blood first with perfect forensic accuracy, and then somehow create the body image over it without disturbing those bloodstains using a separate, unknown process. Each proposed method explains one piece of the puzzle only to shatter against another. The camera obscura explains the negative but not the 3D data. The acid theory explains the superficial stain but not the precision. The rubbing technique explains the contact but not the photographic clarity. To accept any single one as the solution, you must also believe that a lone, nameless genius in the 1300s possessed a secret knowledge of optics, chemistry, and human anatomy that would not be rediscovered for centuries, and then took that secret to the grave. The very abundance of these failed theories only deepens the central mystery, leaving us to wonder if the answer is far simpler or infinitely more complex than any act of forgery. Every wound on that ghostly image tells a story of a specific, brutal execution. The man of the shroud was scourged with a Roman flagrum, a whip designed not just to bruise but to tear. His back, legs, and shoulders are covered with scores of these dumbbell-shaped marks. The pattern suggests two executioners, one taller than the other, standing on either side of their victim. This matches the gospel accounts of Jesus being flogged by Roman soldiers before his crucifixion, but the detail goes deeper than a simple match. The wounds are on the back and the backs of the legs, but not on the arms, chest, or front of the legs. This is the precise pattern you would get if a man were tied to a low pillar, bent forward at the waist, leaving his back and the backs of his legs exposed to the lash. A forger inventing a fictional passion would likely cover the entire body in wounds, not understand the specific biomechanics of Roman punishment. Then there is the wound in the side, a large, elliptical gash between the 5th and 6th ribs. This is not a neat, round puncture. Its shape and flow pattern are consistent with a Roman lance thrust upward into the chest cavity. The Gospel of John describes a Roman soldier piercing Jesus' side with a spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water. Modern medical analysis interprets this as a pleural effusion, a buildup of fluid in the lungs that can occur under extreme physical trauma. The blood and the watery fluid separated on the cloth, just as the forensic evidence suggests. Perhaps the most telling detail is what is missing. The man's legs are unbroken. In a standard Roman crucifixion, the final act was often to break the victim's legs with a heavy club, a practice called crurifragium. This prevented the condemned from pushing up with their legs to breathe, hastening death by asphyxiation. The Gospel of John states explicitly that the soldiers broke the legs of the two men crucified with Jesus, but when they came to him, they saw he was already dead and did not break his legs, instead piercing his side with a spear. The shroud shows no evidence of leg fractures, yet displays the spear wound. This is not a general correlation. It is a point-for-point match to a single, specific narrative. If this is a forgery, the artist did not just read the Bible. They possessed a deep, almost clinical understanding of Roman execution methods and the unique physiological consequences described in one gospel. They knew to put the nail wounds in the wrists, not the palms, for anatomical accuracy. They knew to depict a cap of thorns, not a crown, which would have produced a different wound pattern. They understood the specific sequence of wounds and the medical reason one victim's legs would be left intact. To accept these correlations as genuine is to confront a staggering possibility. It suggests the shroud is not merely a representation of the crucifixion, but a direct physical witness to the event, a first-century forensic photograph. The image becomes a silent testimony. Its every mark a chapter in a story that has resonated for 2 millennia. The carbon dating points to the 1300s, but the cloth and its wounds whisper of the 1st century. This leaves a tantalizing gap of over 1,300 years in the shroud's history. Where was it, and how did it travel from a Jerusalem tomb to a small French church? The historical record is silent, but a compelling theory suggests it may have been hiding in plain sight under a different name. In the ancient city of Edessa, now modern-day Urfa in Turkey, a powerful legend existed about a sacred cloth. It was called the Image of Edessa, or the Mandylion. The story tells of King Abgar V, who ruled Edessa in the 1st century. He was ill and sent a messenger to Jesus asking to be healed. The story says Jesus pressed a cloth to his face, and his divine image was miraculously transferred onto it. This cloth, the Mandylion, was then taken to Edessa, where it was venerated for centuries as a holy relic bearing the face of Jesus. The key to this theory lies in how the Mandylion was described. Historical accounts state it was not a full-length burial shroud, but a small cloth showing only a face. But what if that was a misunderstanding? Some historians propose that the Mandylion was, in fact, the Turin Shroud, but folded in a specific way. Imagine the 14-foot-long linen cloth folded into quarters and then secured within a frame so that only the face was visible. This would perfectly match the descriptions of the Edessa cloth. It would have been presented not as a burial cloth, but as a sacred portrait, its full, shocking nature kept secret for centuries. This theory provides a plausible route. The Mandylion was moved from Edessa to the great capital of the Byzantine Empire, Constantinople, in the year 944. It was housed there in the imperial palace's Pharaoh's Chapel, one of the most revered relics in Christendom. Then, in the year 1204, a catastrophic event occurred. The army of the Fourth Crusade, instead of fighting Muslims, shockingly sacked the Christian city of Constantinople. The city was looted and countless relics were stolen or lost. Could a French knight like Geoffroy de Charny's ancestor have acquired the folded Mandylion in the chaos of that sack and brought it back to Europe? The timeline fits. The shroud appears in Lyre just about 150 years after the fall of Constantinople, a reasonable amount of time for a precious, secret relic to be passed down through a noble family before being revealed to the public. The theory elegantly bridges the immense gap. The shroud was not missing. It was simply known by another name, its true identity as a full-length burial cloth carefully concealed. Its journey a secret written not in parchment, but in the pollen grains from Jerusalem and Edessa found upon its linen. The shroud's long and perilous journey nearly ended in ash and smoke. In the early hours of December 4, 1532, a devastating fire erupted in the Sainte-Chapelle in Chambéry, France, where the relic was kept. Flames engulfed the chapel, licking at the silver casket that held the linen. The intense heat was enough to melt part of the reliquary, and a single, molten drop of silver burned right through the folded cloth, leaving a series of identical, scorched holes. For a moment, it seemed this sacred object would be utterly consumed, but in a desperate rescue, priests rushed into the burning chapel, doused the blazing casket with water, and managed to pull the shroud from the inferno. It was saved, but profoundly scarred. The cloth was left with severe scorch marks along its edges and those distinctive, symmetrical burn holes. The water used to quench the flames left large mirror image stains, a permanent reminder of its brush with annihilation. The shroud was damaged, but it was not lost. To repair the precious linen, it was given to a group of poor Clare nuns. With incredible patience and skill, they sewed a backing cloth onto the entire shroud for support. Then, over each of the burn holes, they carefully patched them with small, triangular pieces of new linen. These reinforcements are still clearly visible today, a stark, geometric pattern of light fabric against the older, sepia-toned cloth, a silent testament to the day the shroud almost vanished. This event is not just a dramatic footnote, it directly fuels the scientific debate. That fire and the water that saved it introduced unknown contaminants into the ancient fibers. Could the soot, the melted silver, or the dousing have altered the cloth's chemistry just enough to mislead the carbon dating test 450 years later? The fire of Chambéry did not destroy the shroud, but it may have permanently obscured its true age, wrapping its origin in one final protective layer of mystery. The shroud survived fire and water, but its next great trial would come not from accident, but from a deliberate act of preservation. In 2002, with no prior announcement to the wider scientific community, a renowned textile conservator named Mechthild Fleury Lemberg was given permission to perform a radical restoration on the sacred linen. For centuries, the shroud had been supported by the backing cloth sewn on by the poor Clare nuns after the fire of 1532. Fleury Lemberg and her team carefully removed this 16th century backing, along with the 30 patches that had covered the burn holes. Their goal was noble: to preserve the relic for future generations by cleaning it of dust and securing it with a new, state-of-the-art backing. They meticulously pressed the cloth and removed what they believed were centuries of accumulated debris. But when news of this secret operation broke, it ignited a firestorm of criticism that dwarfed the controversy of the carbon dating. Scientists around the world were aghast. They argued that this well-intentioned restoration was in fact an irreversible catastrophe. The dust that was so carefully vacuumed away, the threads that were removed, were not just dirt. They were a priceless, untouched archive. That debris could have contained pollen grains, textile fibers, and other microscopic particles that held clues to the shroud's true journey across continents and centuries. The original stitching of the backing cloth itself was a historical document, a snapshot of medieval repair techniques. By replacing it, the restorers had erased a layer of the shroud's own story. The most intense criticism focused on the action of pressing the cloth. Critics claimed this physical pressure could have permanently altered the delicate, superficial nature of the image fibers, potentially destroying the very evidence that made the shroud so unique. The scientific community felt it had been robbed of evidence it did not even know it had, a library of microscopic clues swept away before it could ever be read. This event created a deep and lasting schism. On one side were the conservators acting to protect the physical object from decay. On the other were the scientists who saw the shroud not just as a relic to be preserved, but as a puzzle to be solved, a single, irreplaceable crime scene where every speck of dust was a potential witness. The 2002 restoration did not answer any of the old questions. Instead, it raised a painful new one. In trying to save the shroud, did its guardians inadvertently destroy the best chance we had to ever truly understand it? Among the many theories attempting to solve this puzzle, one name stands out for its sheer audacity and modern appeal: Leonardo da Vinci, the ultimate Renaissance man, a genius of art, science, and invention, seems a perfect candidate to have engineered history's most perfect relic. The theory suggests that Leonardo, using his vast knowledge of anatomy and optics, was secretly commissioned to create the shroud in the late 15th century. How might he have done it? Proponents imagine a macabre and brilliant process. Leonardo could have obtained a cadaver, subjected it to the wounds of crucifixion, and then, using an early camera obscura, projected the corpse's image onto a linen cloth coated with a light-sensitive substance. This would explain the negative image and the startling anatomical accuracy. It is a story that fits our desire for a singular, brilliant villain behind the curtain, a mastermind whose skills were so advanced they fooled the world for centuries. The timeline, however, presents an insurmountable problem. The shroud was already a well-known, publicly venerated object in the possession of the House of Savoy by the time Leonardo was a young man. Historical records place it definitively in Europe decades before his birth. For this theory to hold, the carbon dating would have to be completely wrong. The entire documented history of the shroud before the 1500s would have to be a forgery, and Leonardo would have had to create a perfect replica to replace the existing medieval shroud without anyone noticing the switch. There is not a single shred of direct historical evidence linking Leonardo to the cloth. No diary entries, no commission records, no whispers from his contemporaries. So why does this idea persist so powerfully in books and documentaries? It speaks to our fascination with genius and our deep-seated need for a human-scale explanation. Faced with an object that defies logic, we find comfort in attributing its creation to the one historical figure we believe was capable of anything. Leonardo becomes a convenient vessel for our awe, a way to contain the shroud's mystery within the bounds of human ingenuity, even when the facts point decisively away from his studio. One of the most radical theories to emerge from this scientific stalemate proposes that the shroud was not forged by human hands, nor created by a simple chemical process, but was instead imprinted by a sudden, unimaginable burst of energy. It is called the neutron flux hypothesis, and it attempts to solve both of the shroud's greatest mysteries at once: the origin of the image and the confusing carbon dating. Imagine the moment of resurrection not as a quiet spiritual event, but as a physical phenomenon of immense power. Some scientists suggest that at the instant the body dematerialized, it released a flood of subatomic particles, primarily neutrons. This invisible radiation would have shot out in every direction, and when it struck the linen cloth, it would have done two remarkable things simultaneously. First, this neutron bombardment could have caused a subtle, superficial scorching of the linen fibers. The radiation would have interacted with the atoms in the cloth, essentially causing a molecular-level change that darkened the very topmost fibrils. This process would not require any paint or pigment. It would be a direct transfer of energy from the body to the cloth, creating a perfect, negative, three-dimensional image encoded with distance information, just as the VP8 analyzer revealed. But the second effect is even more profound. That same burst of neutrons would have fundamentally altered the cloth's atomic makeup. Radiocarbon dating relies on measuring a specific isotope, carbon-14. When the linen was bombarded with neutrons, some of the normal, stable nitrogen atoms in the flax fibers would have absorbed these neutrons and been transformed into brand new carbon-14 atoms. This sudden, massive injection of fresh carbon-14 would have completely reset the cloth's radioactive clock. To a carbon dating machine thousands of years later, the linen would appear brand new. It would give a date not from the 1st century, but from the time of the neutron burst. If this event happened around the year 33, the new carbon-14 would decay at its normal rate, and by the time scientists tested it in 1988, the remaining amount would point precisely to the 1300s. The controversial medieval date would not be a mistake. It would be a direct and predictable consequence of the resurrection event itself. This theory is, of course, highly speculative and far from proven. It requires a one-time physical event for which we have no other evidence, yet it stands as a breathtakingly elegant solution, a single cause that explains the inexplicable image and the baffling date, weaving science and faith into a single, untestable, and utterly compelling narrative. Today, this ancient linen rests in a fortress of modern science. Its home is the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy, but you will not find it draped over a simple altar. The shroud is secured within a custom-built, climate-controlled case that resembles something from a high-tech museum. This container is a marvel of preservation, a sealed chamber made of bulletproof glass and filled with an inert gas, typically argon. This environment is meticulously designed to protect the fragile fibers from its greatest enemies, oxygen, which causes decay, humidity, which encourages mold, and any potential contamination from the outside world. It is a silent, sterile vault, a world away from the smoky chapels and raging fires of its past. For most of the time, the shroud remains in this state of suspended animation, hidden from public view, a secret kept safe within the cathedral's Cappella della Sindone. But on rare and momentous occasions, the Catholic Church grants a public viewing known as an ostension. These are not simple church services, they are global events meticulously planned years in advance. The shroud is removed from its high-tech case and displayed for a period of weeks, draped behind a massive, protective screen. The world takes notice. Millions of pilgrims, scientists, and curious tourists from every corner of the globe descend upon the city of Turin. They wait in lines that stretch for hours, a river of humanity flowing through the streets, all for a chance to spend a few brief moments in the presence of this mysterious cloth. For some, it is an act of profound faith, a spiritual pilgrimage to connect with the divine. For others, it is a unique opportunity to see one of the world's most debated artifacts with their own eyes. These exhibitions transform the city into a crossroads of belief and skepticism, a place where the ancient and the modern collide. The shroud, once nearly lost to fire and hidden away in private collections, now draws crowds that number in the millions, its silent, ghostly image still holding the power to captivate the world. So where does the institution at the center of this mystery, the Catholic Church, stand on the shroud? The official position is a fascinating study in balance and nuance. The Church has never formally declared the Turin Shroud to be the authentic burial cloth of Jesus Christ. It makes no dogmatic pronouncement on its authenticity. Instead, the Church officially venerates it as an icon. This is a crucial distinction. An icon is not worshipped for what it is, but revered for what it represents. The shroud is seen as a powerful, tangible mirror of the Passion, a sacred image that reflects the depth of Christ's suffering and sacrifice, regardless of its scientific origin. This allows the Church to embrace its spiritual significance while remaining neutral on the historical and scientific debate that rages around it. Popes themselves have reflected this delicate balance for over a century. When Secondo Pia revealed the photographic negative in 1898, it was Pope Pius XI who later called the shroud a holy and venerable thing. Decades later, Pope Pius XII authorized a special prayer for the Shroud of Turin, further endorsing its devotional use. Pope John Paul II, during a visit to Turin in 1998, made a statement that perfectly captures the Church's stance. He called the shroud a challenge to our intelligence, acknowledging that it requires the commitment of diverse disciplines to discover the secret of this image which the human eye alone cannot perceive. He encouraged scientific investigation, but always with a profound respect for the faith of millions who see in the cloth a poignant reflection of the gospel story. This creates a remarkable dynamic where the Church both protects the relic for scientific study and promotes it as a focal point for devotion, a sacred paradox that welcomes both the microscopes of the researcher and the tears of the pilgrim. It is a position that does not seek to resolve the mystery, but to honor the profound questions it raises for both faith and reason. The digital age has peeled back another layer from this ancient linen, revealing secrets that have slept for centuries in plain sight. Using the most advanced high-resolution scanners and sophisticated image processing software, scientists have now examined the shroud in a way no human eye ever could. They have scanned every square millimeter at resolutions so high they can inspect individual threads, then used algorithms to enhance contrast and pull out details buried within the faint straw yellow stains. The results are nothing short of astonishing. Around the region of the man's eyes, digital analysis has revealed two faint circular objects. When these are enhanced and compared to ancient coinage, a startling match emerges. Their size, design, and apparent markings align with a specific Jewish coin, a lepton, minted during the reign of Pontius Pilate in the 1st century. Placing coins on the eyes of the deceased was a known burial custom in some ancient cultures, intended to keep the eyelids closed or to pay a symbolic fare to the underworld. If these faint impressions are indeed coins, they provide a powerful historical anchor, placing the shroud firmly within a specific time and place, 1st century Judea under Roman rule. But the digital discoveries do not stop there. Further computer enhancement of the facial area has teased out another ghostly presence, a series of nearly invisible markings that appear to be letters. Faint, fragmented script has been identified in 3 languages, Greek, Latin, and Aramaic, scattered around the face like fragments of a disintegrated papyrus. One interpretation of these letters spells out what could be read as in Nazarenus, meaning the Nazarene. Another cluster may correspond to the name Caesar, as in Tiberius Caesar, the emperor during Pilate's rule. These are not clear, printed words, but the digital equivalent of a whisper, a pattern of stains that the human brain can interpret as writing. Skeptics argue that our pattern-seeking minds are simply connecting random discolorations, creating words from noise, much like seeing shapes in clouds. Yet the possibility remains electrifying. Could these be the faded remnants of a death certificate, a small scroll or papyrus slip that was placed on the forehead of the deceased according to some Roman practices, its ink transferring a faint, ghostly residue to the cloth? This digital evidence weaves a new and intricate thread into the tapestry of the mystery. It suggests a historical specificity that feels almost too perfect. A forger would need an encyclopedic knowledge of 1st century Judean coinage, ancient languages, and obscure burial rites, then possess the means to imprint these details in a way that would remain invisible for over 600 years, only to be discovered by computers in the 21st century. The digital eye sees what we cannot, forcing us to confront an image that seems to hold more information with every technological leap. A puzzle that only deepens as our tools to solve it grow more powerful. Another piece of ancient cloth holds a crucial piece of this puzzle. In the Cathedral of Oviedo, Spain, a small linen cloth known as the sudarium is preserved. This is not a shroud but a face cloth, described in the Gospel of John as having been placed over the head of Jesus in the tomb. Unlike the Shroud of Turin, the sudarium has no mysterious image. It is simply a stained, dirty piece of fabric measuring about 34 by 21 inches, covered in dark, distinct bloodstains. Its history is well documented, tracing back to at least the 7th century in Spain, and its simple, unadorned state makes it a powerful witness. When forensic scientists placed the bloodstain patterns of the sudarium over the corresponding facial area of the Shroud of Turin, they made a startling discovery. The stains matched perfectly, the patterns of blood flow, the specific points of origin, and the way the stains had seeped into the linen aligned as if the two cloths had covered the same head in rapid succession. The forensic narrative is chillingly specific. The sudarium, as a face cloth, would have been used to cover the head of the deceased shortly after death, while the body was still upright on the cross or just after being taken down. The stains indicate a massive pulmonary edema, where fluid from the lungs is coughed up, consistent with the suffocation of crucifixion. This cloth was then likely folded and placed beside the body in the tomb. Later, when the full shroud was used to wrap the body, the face cloth would have been removed, accounting for the Gospel's mention of it being found separately. The blood on both cloths is type AB, a rare but not unique blood type, and the patterns suggest a single, tragic sequence of events. For two separate forgeries created centuries apart in different parts of Europe, to share such a precise and complex forensic link stretches coincidence to its breaking point. This small, unassuming cloth from Oviedo does not offer a miraculous image, but it provides something perhaps more valuable, a tangible, blood-soaked thread connecting it to the great shroud in Turin, suggesting both were witnesses to the same final moments. That ghostly face in the linen speaks to something far deeper than science or history. It taps into a fundamental human yearning for a bridge between our world and the divine. For millions, faith is an internal, spiritual experience, but the shroud offers something profoundly different, a physical object that seems to bear the marks of a sacred story. It transforms an abstract belief into a tangible relic you could, in theory, touch and test. This desire for proof is a powerful force, a longing for a sign that the spiritual realm has broken through into our physical reality, leaving behind not just a story but a piece of evidence. This is why the shroud's mystery is so compelling. It lives in that tantalizing space between faith and fact, offering just enough to inspire belief but never enough to provide certainty. Its influence radiates far beyond the cathedral. For centuries, it has silently shaped Western art. Look at the depictions of Jesus from the Renaissance onward, the serene, bearded face with a distinct hair part, the long nose, and the peaceful yet somber expression. These iconic features bear a striking resemblance to the positive image revealed by Secondo Pia's photograph. Artists who had never seen the shroud were influenced by a cultural memory of it, a visual template that seeped into the collective imagination and became the standard face of Christ. In our modern era, its impact is even more direct. The shroud has been featured in blockbuster films, detailed in countless documentaries, and inspired episodes of television shows focused on the paranormal. It is a recurring character in novels that blend historical conspiracy with religious thriller. This constant presence in popular culture reinforces its status as the ultimate historical puzzle, a mystery that belongs to everyone, believer and skeptic alike. Ultimately, the shroud functions as a kind of spiritual Rorschach test. What you see in its faint stains often says more about you than about the cloth itself. A devout Christian may look at the wounds and see a perfect confirmation of the Gospel's passion narrative. A forensic scientist can examine the same stains and see a fascinating, if baffling, medical case study. A historian might focus on the weave of the linen and the pollen grains, building a case for its ancient journey, and a skeptic will point to the carbon dating as the final, rational word. The shroud's great power is its ability to hold all these conflicting viewpoints simultaneously without collapsing under their weight. It does not resolve our debates about God, science, or history. Instead, it gives them a single, fragile, linen canvas upon which to play out, generation after generation, ensuring its mystery will never grow old. Modern scientists have tried to recreate the shroud in laboratories, armed with technology its creator could never have imagined. Teams have employed powerful ultraviolet lasers, directing precise bursts of energy at linen draped over a bas-relief of a human face. The goal is to mimic that superficial, straw-yellow discoloration that exists only on the topmost fibrils. In some attempts, they have succeeded in creating a faint, negative-like image. The laser can scorch the fibers just enough to produce a color change without any pigment, and the image can even be made to wrap around a three-dimensional form. Yet these high-tech replicas always fall short. The laser burns are often too deep, or the image lacks the subtle, continuous tonal range of the original. It creates a crude silhouette, not the hauntingly soft and detailed portrait of the man from Turin. Other experiments have used chemical vapors. By suspending linen over a heated statue coated with certain acids, researchers have managed to produce a superficial stain through a process of cellulose degradation. This method gets closer to the shroud's lack of pigment, but it fails on the level of precision. The vapors diffuse and spread, creating a blurry, distorted image. They cannot achieve the microscopic controls seen on the shroud, where individual threads are colored right next to completely unmarked ones, forming the delicate gradients of a lip or an eyelid. What do these sophisticated failures tell us? They demonstrate that while we can approximate one or two of the shroud's properties in isolation, combining them all into a single, coherent image remains utterly beyond our reach. A laser can create a superficial image but struggles with detail. A chemical process can avoid pigments but lacks control. No single modern method can produce an image that is simultaneously a perfect photographic negative, encoded with three-dimensional data, and chemically identical to the original, all while being superimposed over pre-existing, forensically accurate bloodstains. Every attempt to build a better forgery only ends up building a greater mystery. If 21st century technology with its lasers and computers cannot perfectly replicate the shroud, what does that say about the chances of a lone artisan pulling it off in the 1300s with a camera obscura and a pot of acid? The silence from the laboratory is in its own way as loud as any declaration of authenticity. The most baffling questions about the shroud are not just historical curiosities. They are deep structural cracks in our understanding of how the world works. How was this image formed? We have ruled out paint, dye, and stain. We have proposed acids, vapors, and light projections, yet no single method explains the perfect negative, the encoded three-dimensional data, and the microscopic precision on the topmost fibrils. If it was a simple chemical reaction, why can't our best modern laboratories, with their lasers and controlled environments, produce a perfect duplicate? Every attempt creates a crude imitation, a blurry silhouette that lacks the haunting subtlety of the original. This failure is a profound clue. It suggests the process involved is either a lost art of unimaginable sophistication or something entirely outside the realm of conventional physics. Then there is the great schism in the evidence. The forensic details scream of the 1st century, a specific Roman crucifixion with pathological blood and unbroken legs. The pollen and the ancient weave point to the Holy Land, yet the carbon dating firmly plants the cloth in the Middle Ages. Do we trust the atoms in the linen or the story they tell? This is not a minor discrepancy. It is a fundamental clash between two trusted forms of evidence, and choosing one requires you to discredit the other. Perhaps the most persistent question of all is why this single artifact continues to captivate us. Is it because we secretly hope for a tangible connection to the divine, a physical witness to the stories that have shaped civilizations? Or is it the ultimate cold case, a puzzle that defies every expert who tries to solve it? These unanswered questions are not a failure of investigation. They are the very engine of the mystery, ensuring that the silent man in the linen will continue to challenge both our faith and our reason for generations to come. The evidence for the Turin Shroud presents two complete and compelling realities that cannot be easily merged. On one hand, the forensic details feel undeniable. The blood behaves like real blood, with its serum halos and pathological profile of bilirubin and creatinine. The three-dimensional information encoded within the image is a property no artist can create, and the wounds align with a specific, brutal Roman crucifixion in startling anatomical detail. This evidence points toward an authentic 1st century origin, a physical witness to a profound historical event. Yet, the carbon dating from 3 independent laboratories firmly places the linen in the medieval period, and the lack of a clear historical record before the 1350s remains a significant obstacle. This is the core of the enigma, a relic that seems to be both impossibly ancient and definitively medieval. Its true power may not lie in which side is ultimately proven correct, but in its unique position at the intersection of faith, science, and history. It challenges the believer to confront scientific evidence and the skeptic to acknowledge the limits of our current understanding. The shroud does not provide answers so much as it holds a space for profound questions. It asks us what we accept as proof, and where we draw the line between a miracle and a masterpiece of human ingenuity that has somehow been lost to time. Perhaps some mysteries are not meant to be solved but to be pondered. They remind us that the world still holds wonders that defy our categories, objects that captivate not because they provide certainty, but because they preserve a beautiful, haunting uncertainty. What do you believe lies behind the mystery of the Turin Shroud? Share your own conclusions in the comments below.